Hello everyone, welcome to the Homesteaders Classroom. Today I brought y'all, or rather tonight, I brought y'all inside because it's time to start some seeds. Now honestly, this is the first time that I've started seeds inside. For the previous years of gardening, I've always just waited until it was warm enough and stuck my seeds in the ground or in my pots, and that worked great. There are some seeds that even prefer starting from just straight in the ground instead of being transferred into pots or into little seed starting pots. But there is definitely a large benefit to starting your seeds inside, and that is that you get to have your plants for a lot longer. You get to beat the season, get a head start, and then you can be producing fruit and harvesting from your garden sooner than if you had to wait for it to get warm enough to plant them outside yourself. So, since it's my first year, I had to do a lot of research on how to start seeds, what were the materials that I needed, what grow lights I needed, all this other stuff. And I just found that there are a lot of different ways to start your seeds, and there's a lot of different information out there. So I decided, you know what, it's time for another experiment because I don't want to take anything at face value. I want to be able to try it out for myself and see what works best for me, and also bring y'all along and so we can see what the findings are. So to start off, I have just this large tray that has these individual smaller, see the little individual small tiny little cubes in it, I guess you could say. Now this is a smaller version. They do even come even smaller than this, and they come even larger than this. I found that when it came to different pots, it depended on how you wanted to do things. The smallest of all the pots that you can start your seeds in are meant exclusively for if you're going to use a seed starting mix and you just barely let them get living before you transplant them into something bigger. And this one too, I think that if you really wanted to keep it growing, you could transplant into something bigger. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to try. This looks good to me. Another key point is that it needs to have holes in the bottom of it so that the water can drip out and it doesn't get just completely swamped with all that excess water, which these do have in it. And the cool thing about the shape of it, the cone, is that it's supposed to, according to the packaging, make it so that your roots want to grow downward instead of kind of going around, which if you have your roots growing around, then your plant can potentially get root bound. At the same time, you shouldn't even have your plant in there that long to get root bound before you put it into the garden. So I wanted to try these guys out. Another thing is this whole setup was really cheap. It was probably like $5. There are some way more involved setups out there that include like ones that automatically water and are bottom watering, and you can wick it away. But then when I looked at those were like $15, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to pay that. This is my first time starting it. Not to mention there are plenty of other people out there who are not doing bottom watering trays or having that special setup, and they manage to have their garden just fine. Like, I doubt commercial farmers end up all having bottom watering trays for the thousands of plants that they use, because that would just get way too expensive way too fast. So these are the little pots that I'm deciding to start my seeds in. There are what I'm going to do is I put 2 seeds in each one so that hopefully I get germination from at least one of them. And my plan is to have one plant per tiny little cell and just grow it from there before I transplant it into my garden. Another variety I saw a lot of though is that you could, if you wanted to, just get a larger container and plant more seeds in it. And then when they grow, you can then very carefully separate them and put them into each individual pot. Therefore, you're not wasting seeds. With that method, you get to keep your seeds, and it's something that I'll probably look into. But with this method of me having to, if I have 2 plants grow in one cell, I have to remove one. This is for a space-saving method because I do not have a lot of room. I only have enough room for this one tray. So that's the method that we're going to use. I'm sure some of y'all have a very limited amount of space. Maybe you're growing in an apartment like me where I don't have a garage. If you have a garage, maybe your garage is all cluttered up and you just got, way too much stuff in your house. So this is a small method. I still am going to grow a lot from this one tiny tray, but I also don't have a big garden. So this is going to work for me. Okay, the other thing we're going to talk about is soil. So this is something I kept reading. I kept reading that if you want to start seeds, you have to use seed starting mix. Do you know how expensive seed starting mix is? Now this is just one bag, right? Okay. But this one bag, which is not very big at all, though granted, yes, I could get one use out of it. This one bag is over $5. This bag, potting mix, which is 3 times the size of this one bag, is a little over $3. So for me, sure, I'm only starting a couple seeds, and I could buy this one bag and it wouldn't even get used all up, and I'd be like, okay, well, no problem. But if we're talking on a larger scale here, which I hope to grow on a larger scale, that is a lot of seed starting potting mix that you have to buy. And I just feel like, costs add up easily, and I'm on a budget right now, at least. I'm sure there's more people out there who are on. So do we really have to use this stuff? That's what I want to find out. So what's supposedly so good about seed starting mix is that it is very, very fine grain texture, which I can attest to that. In comparison, this potting mix that I have right here, it is fine as well, but not nearly as much. We've got bigger clumps of stuff. We've got sticks and everything in it. It's just not as fine of texture. It still works great, but the texture is not as fine and there are clumps. So why does it matter about our texture of our soil when we're starting seeds? So the whole point of starting these seeds is that we want to get a really good root system growing on them. So the theory here is that if you have very fine soil, that your roots will be able to grow just uninhibited through that soil, and they'll be able to grow faster and stronger without having anything in the way. And it's supposed to make it a very, very good root system. So potting soil is a step lower than that. It's not as fine, but it's definitely not as thick as your regular garden soil or even your raised bed soil. This is still pretty light. It has to be because, pots need that additional aeration when you're gardening in pots. So it is still light and fluffy, but just not as light and fluffy. And like you saw, it had some sticks in it. So maybe the roots might have to work harder to grow in this. I can actually see that as a possibility, sure, especially if there just happens to be like a stick that's right underneath it. And so when your seed starts developing its root system, it has to work around that little stick. So remember, your seeds only have enough energy to grow right to the top of the soil. And then once they get enough to get their leaves up to the top of the soil, that's when they really start working on the root system. These plants, these seed starting trays, they're only supposed to, you're only supposed to really work on it 6 weeks to 8 weeks, depending on your plant, before your growing season actually starts. I'm definitely a little bit behind on mine, but I'm still a couple weeks ahead, maybe 2 or 3. We still had some cold nights, and it's supposed to be before your last frost date that you try to put these in the ground. So both of these seem to work, but we're just going to see which one works best for my variety. Another thing that I found out about most seed starting mixes is that they don't really have any additional nutrients in them. So you have to give them fertilizer after a while of having them grow in their little cells if you don't transplant them into a potting mix, because the whole preferred method is start them in little tiny cells and seed starting mix, and then when they get big enough and they have their root system grown, transfer them into a potting mix. I really don't want to do all those steps. I just want to see, it, or if I decide that I want to do all those steps, I want to see if it's even really worth it. It's best to test it out. So that's what I'm going to do. Potting soil does have extra nutrients in it. I won't have to fertilize these guys in the potting soil when it comes down to it, because they have, at least for this one is a 6-month fertilizer. So that the bag, at least on my potting mix, claims that it can supply nutrients to your plants for up to 6 months before you have to fertilize it. That's definitely enough time for those seeds to get them in the ground and get them into even more nutrients. So I don't have to worry about it. If I do have to fertilize, I did get this fertilizer right here. It is organic fish fertilizer, or fish emulsions, and I've heard that this works really well when it comes to seed starting. It's not too harsh, because that's one thing you have to worry about if you're fertilizing your seeds. Like, you can very easily shock them and give them too much. We don't want to do that. So I have a plan. I'm going to let these guys be, not fertilize them. They have enough. And then these guys, if they need it, then I will fertilize them. Because this little potting mix right here does say that it has nutrients in them. Most of them don't, but this one does. Although I will say, with this specific brand, which is Miracle Grow, the whole point of seed starting mix is that there's not supposed to be anything in it. It's supposed to be very fine. But look at this. This is a giant stick I found in the seed starting mix. This is something I would expect out of my potting mix, not my seed starting mix. So be careful. Now, it was just like the one giant stick and then maybe two. I don't know what Miracle Grow's doing, but most seed starting mixes shouldn't have that in it. All right, so I got my seeds all set up right here. On this side we have potting mix. On this side we have seed starting mix. I'm sure you can see the difference. Fine texture, definitely a little bit bulkier. But so before I started and put any of this soil in these little pots, I did thoroughly wash these containers. Yes, they were brand new, but just in case, I wanted to thoroughly wash them, make sure that there's no diseases. It's very important to do that. If you do have diseases in the soil, of course, it's going to affect your little seedlings as they grow, and they can have something happen in which it's called dampening off, in which they get too sick or they just don't grow well. And we want to prevent that. We want strong, healthy seedlings. Another step that I did with this potting mix, I did buy a brand new bag to start my seeds in, but there was a hole in it. So there's a possibility that no matter how slim, there was still a possibility that it could have disease in it. So I poured boiling water into my mixture of potting soil, mixed it all up to disinfect it. Basically, it would kill off, boiling water is going to kill off any mold or any other seeds that are in it to prevent them from growing, prevent disease. Waited until it was cool and filled the trays. So because they are a little bit stranger shaped, what I did is I filled all my trays up with some soil, tamped them down a little bit, just very gently. I didn't use any more than 2 fingers to do it. And like this one doesn't have anything in it, so like very gently tamped down. Nothing stronger than that. And then I put my seeds on top. I'm growing like I think about 30 different varieties of tomatoes and peppers and eggplants here. And like, the off melon. I know that you can't tell, but I did make a very detailed chart that is for me, and it has all of my varieties on it. And basically the way that I did it is, this is a certain tomato variety, and then here's the other one. So I can keep track of where what is. And my plan is not just to see which does better in a seed starting mix, but also to transplanting, letting them harden off in the sun, and then also to transplanting and seeing which one does better overall. Okay, so anyways, back to this. We have our seeds ready. What I'm going to be doing is just very gently kind of putting them down. Boop, boop. A little boop, boop in it.
I don't really, oh, okay, so maybe not that method. Okay, I'll go to method number 2, in which I decided I was just going to sprinkle some more mix on top of all of them, just to put a very fine layer. Only the melon seeds am I going to actually try to get in the ground and push them further in because they're a lot larger. But these tomato, pepper, eggplant seeds are so tiny. And even these ground cherry seeds, I don't know, see how tiny those are? Like they need the lightest covering since they only have so much energy to fight to the surface. So I'm just going to do a light covering over them, just kind of dust it over instead. And that should be enough to see, for example, wow, looky there. Bam, my seed is covered. Now what I did do before I put them all in this tray is I did add water. It's just easier instead of trying to water the whole cell on top and get it all damp because that water could easily displace your seeds. So I did start with a wet solution, mixed water into it already, and it just makes it easier. What I read is the texture is like a sponge that's been wrung out. That's exactly what I did. So give that a try. I'm going to cover these up and we'll go to the next step. Okay, guys, we're all covered up. So the final stage that I'm going to do, as you can see, this is a little bit dry, is I'm going to water some more. Now I just made a very, I just poked some holes in this water bottle, a little handmade watering can, because we want to be very gentle when we're watering these seeds in so they don't get displaced. And it's kind of important to water after. I know that I already made the soil wet, but we want to make sure there's not an air pocket in between the seed and the soil. So I'm just going to go ahead and see. Very gently just go over. Might take some time because of this newfound structure, but let me go ahead and water, and then we're going to take them to the grow light. Okay, guys, so we're here in my laundry room. I've put my seeds right underneath their grow light. Now, even though this isn't a bottom watering tray, I did go ahead and put some water down there. You can see that it's just a teeny tiny bit, kind of to act as just a backup. Because one thing about starting seeds is they are going to dry out rather quickly. You need to check these bad boys every single day to make sure that their moisture content is good enough, especially before they have sprouted. Because if you don't have enough moisture, you're not going to get your seeds to sprout. So, going to check these every day. Of course, right now it's going to take a couple of days since I have peppers, tomatoes, eggplants. They usually can take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to sprout, depending on the variety. So, my little pack, well, it's Jiffy, I guess, came with a little plastic cover. And I think this is to just act as a little greenhouse right here. To kind of get the heat, especially, like I said, if you're using these tiny cells, they're not supposed to get too big before you transplant them. I'm going to say screw that and see what we can do with it. So before I put that on, though, I want to show y'all my grow light. Right now, it is very close to these little seeds because you do not want your plants to have to stretch to reach the light. If they do, they end up getting something called legginess, in which it'll start getting just weaker and more spindly. So I'm not really going to go too much into this grow light right now because I'm going to do a video on what to look for in a grow light. But just know that the variety I got is kind of cool. It has some light functions. One, it has the white light, which is what I'm going to use. I'm going to turn it on, let it get a little bit hot. Along with the white light, it has the ability to do red light. Red light is good for plants that are fruiting or flowering. And then we have blue light. Apparently the blue light spectrum is really great for seedlings. So I'm gonna, one that looks terrible, but I'm going to experiment with those lights while I'm doing my seed starting. I thought, why not? But for right now, I'm gonna put their little covering on top. And a little light to keep them warm. Start these bad boys off. Another thing about these, here, let me turn this because they're reflecting everywhere. Turn that back on when I'm done talking to y'all. Another thing about seeds, though, is that since we're starting them underneath the grow light, they're going to need a lot of light. They're going to need at least 16 hours of light on your grow light when you start them indoors to make up for the actual energy that they would get from the sun. I know that seems like a lot, but it's only 16 hours for the first start. Once they become a little bit mature, you can back that down to maybe 12 to 14 hours. But, we're trying to make up for the sun's energy here. So be aware of that when you start plants indoors. You're going to have that light on for a very long time.
Okay, guys, I finally was able to get seeds started for this season. I am super excited about this. This is new territory for me, and I'm really excited about my experiment. I know this is going to be a great opportunity for learning and growing, and I'm glad that y'all could come along with it. I will post a video in which I plan to do things like take pictures of the seeds every day, see how they go. I'm just as curious as y'all to see what's going to end up working out. I really hope that the potting soil works out just fine, because I really don't want to have to buy seed starting mix every time I want to start some seeds. I guess the last tidbit I can give y'all is don't start your seeds indoors. Don't do what I did, because you're going to make a mess everywhere, which I have soil all over this table. And then inevitably, you're going to knock over your bag of potting soil, and it's going to get all over the floor. So that's my last tidbit for you. Thank y'all for joining me today, and I hope I see you for the next lesson.